Imagine a civilization so brilliant, so alive, so absolutely convinced of its own permanence that it never saw the end coming. Not Rome, not Egypt, not Babylon, something else. Something that history half forgot. A world built on the edges of the known, on cliffs above the sea, in valleys no map had named yet. By people who left everything behind to build something that had never existed before. They called it Megale Hellas. We call it Magna Graecia, the Great Greece. And for almost 400 years, it was one of the most extraordinary experiments in human civilization. Cities that rivaled Athens in wealth. Philosophers who rewrote the rules of thought. So why did it vanish? That's the question nobody asks loudly enough. We celebrate Greek culture, Greek philosophy, Greek democracy. But we skim over the part where an entire Greek world, built on foreign soil, was swallowed whole. Was it conquest? Was it assimilation? Was it arrogance? Or was it something quieter, more insidious? A slow unravelling that the Greeks themselves could feel but couldn't stop. This is not a story about defeat. It's a story about the cost of greatness. About what happens when a civilization stretches itself too far, believes too hard in its own myth, and forgets the one thing every empire eventually learns. The world does not owe you survival. Settle in. It begins with hunger, not the poetic kind, real hunger. Crowded cities on rocky Greek peninsulas, land that couldn't feed the mouths born onto it, young men with ambition and nowhere to put it. The 8th century BC was not a comfortable time to be Greek. It was, however, a magnificent time to be brave. The Greeks had boats. They had that. Slender wooden ships that could hug coastlines, that could read the wind and the stars, that had already taken Greek merchants across the Aegean and back. And somewhere across the water, further west than most dared to look, was land. Open land. Unclaimed land. Or so they told themselves. The first wave came around 750 BC. Euboean Greeks landed on the coast of what is now southern Italy and planted a city. They called it Cumae. It was the westernmost Greek colony in the world at that moment. A statement as much as a settlement. We are here. We intend to stay. And stay they did. Over the next 2 centuries, Greek cities erupted along the coast of southern Italy, and Sicily like seeds scattered by a careless god. Sybaris, Croton, Tarentum, Metapontum, Locri, Rhegium, Syracuse. Each one founded by a different Greek city-state, Corinthians, Spartans, Achaeans, Rhodians, each one carrying with it the blueprints of Greek civilization, the agora, the temple, the gymnasium, the olive tree. But here is where the story gets interesting, because these were not colonies in the modern sense, not outposts of a mother empire, not administrative extensions of a central power. Each city was its own world, sovereign, proud, stubbornly independent. They shared a language. They were Greeks. Unity was never really the point. The land they'd chosen was already occupied, of course. The Italic peoples, Oscans, Lucanians, Samnites, Bruttians, had lived in those hills and valleys for generations. The Greeks didn't erase them. Instead, they did something more complicated. They built their gleaming, white cities along the coasts and left the interior to others, creating a world where 2 civilizations lived in permanent, uneasy proximity. For a while it worked. Sybaris, founded around 720 BC on the arch of the Italian Boot, became a legend in its own time, a city of such absurd, spectacular wealth that the word Sybarite, meaning someone devoted to sensual pleasure and luxury, entered the Greek language as a kind of half-admiring insult. The Sybarites, it was said, trained their horses to dance to music. They banned blacksmiths and roosters from the city centre, so no one would be disturbed by noise. They held cooking competitions where the winner received a year's worth of glory and the respect of the entire city. Was any of this true? Perhaps. Perhaps not entirely, but the fact that people believed it, that this was how Sybaris presented itself to the world, tells you everything about the ambition of these cities. They didn't just want to survive, they wanted to dazzle. And they did. By the 6th century BC, Magna Graecia was not a footnote to Greek history. It was Greek history, in many ways. The wealth flowing out of cities like Sybaris and Syracuse was staggering. The 5th century BC is usually remembered as Athens' century. The Parthenon, Pericles, Socrates, the golden age of Greek democracy, Greek theatre, Greek everything. But while Athens was busy being Athens, something equally extraordinary was happening in the West. Magna Graecia was thinking. In Croton, on the toe of the Italian boot, a man arrived from the island of Samos around 530 BC. He was in his mid-30s, already famous, or notorious depending on who you asked. He had studied in Egypt, possibly in Babylon. He had spent years absorbing the intellectual currents of the ancient world and had come to Croton because Croton was, in a word, receptive. His name was Pythagoras. You know him for the theorem. But the theorem is almost a footnote. What Pythagoras built in Croton was a school. More than a school, a brotherhood, a philosophical community that combined mathematics, mysticism, politics, and dietary law into one of the strangest and most influential movements in ancient thought. The Pythagoreans believed that numbers were the fundamental reality of the universe, that mathematics was not a tool for understanding the world. It was the world, the language in which the cosmos had written itself. This idea, planted in the soil of southern Italy, would eventually flower into the scientific method, into physics, into the way the modern world thinks about reality. But Pythagoras didn't just theorize, he wielded political power. His brotherhood became a governing force in Croton. When Croton went to war with neighbouring Sybaris around 510 BC and destroyed the city so completely that they diverted a river to cover its ruins, some ancient sources credited Pythagorean influence in that decision. The destruction of Sybaris is one of the defining moments of Magna Graecia's history. Two Greek cities, born of the same civilization, built by people who worshipped the same gods and spoke the same language. One erased the other. Utterly, without mercy. It was a preview of things to come. But in the meantime, philosophy flourished. Elea, a small city on the Tyrrhenian coast, produced Parmenides and Zeno, two thinkers who would drive Western philosophy into territory it had never visited. Parmenides argued that reality was unchanging, unified, indivisible, that change itself was an illusion, that the multiplicity of things we perceive is a kind of trick played on us by our senses. Zeno backed him up with paradoxes so sharp they are still being debated by philosophers and mathematicians today. Think about that. A small Greek colony on the coast of southern Italy in the 5th century BC produced philosophical problems that remain unresolved in the 21st century AD. Further west, in Sicily, the story was equally electric. Syracuse had grown into one of the largest and most powerful cities in the entire Mediterranean world. Under the tyrant Gelon, and later his brother Hiero I, Syracuse became a cultural magnet. Pindar wrote victory odes for Sicilian athletes. Aeschylus, the father of tragedy, the man who invented dramatic theatre as we understand it, spent years in Sicily, staging his plays for Syracusan audiences, and died there. The greatest playwright who ever lived chose to spend part of his life in Magna Graecia. That is not a minor detail. That is a civilization at full bloom. And then there was Empedocles, perhaps the most vivid, strange, and brilliant mind that Magna Graecia ever produced. Born in Akragas in Sicily, a city of such magnificent wealth that Pindar described it as the most beautiful city of mortals, Empedocles proposed something that sounds, to modern ears, almost chemically correct, that all matter is composed of 4 fundamental elements: earth, water, fire, and air, and that the universe is driven by 2 forces: love, which brings things together, and strife, which drives them apart. He was wrong in the details, of course, but he was gesturing at something real, at the idea that the universe has a structure, that it operates according to principles that can be understood, that the chaos of experience conceals a hidden order. He also allegedly threw himself into the volcano at Mount Etna to prove he was a god. Only in Magna Graecia would that story be entirely plausible. This was the Golden Age. Extravagant, brilliant, violent, self-regarding, creative beyond measure. Cities that built temples while plotting against each other. Philosophers who unlocked the secrets of the cosmos while their cities tore themselves apart over politics. The geometry you learned in school. The theatre you sit in. The democracy you vote in. The philosophy you argue about at 2 a.m. The very idea that human beings can look at the world and, through reason alone, understand it. All of it passed through Magna Graecia. All of it carries somewhere in its DNA the fingerprint of people who sailed west in wooden boats, stood on the edge of the known world, looked at the land before them and thought, we can build something extraordinary here. They were right. They were absolutely right.